So, good evening. Um, I do thank you in advance for your patience with my throat tonight. If it's not coming through well at any point, let me know. We're hoping that it should be a relatively straightforward lecture in the sense that we're just going to be doing a little bit more with ReactJS. The point of this lecture is that it's week 9. Hopefully by now most people have kind of started assignment 3. It's due in like 10 days, Thursday morning next week. So most of what you're really doing at this stage is just plodding along. In week 7, we did a basics of React. In week 8, we did a little intro to assignment 3, which was kind of the crux of things. Today, the only thing that I have scheduled to go through is essentially just another demo, a fairly small demo, and we might have some 1531 students here from T3 potentially, so I'm hoping this brings some excitement to those, though I don't think there's a lot of them. I think there's just a small handful. But many of you, particularly the undergrads, would have done COMP6080 probably, well, definitely with me most likely. And one thing that we introduced into the course in 2021 in term 3 was a leaderboard for the project. So maybe about 60-70% of you understand this. There's like a project where students submit their work, but what we did was we actually went and pulled everyone's work off of the master branch throughout term in the lead up to submission dates, and we put it in a leaderboard that looked like this. So we had this nice little page where students could like see how their progress was, see what their scores were for various components, and then look at different iterations and stuff. And the reason I wanted to show you this was a little bit to do with some material UI in assignment 3, because I think that's the one thing we glossed over, but also to look at essentially how to just do something quickly, I guess, because I built this leaderboard, right, maybe like 8 months ago, a while ago, and this is like a really good example of where React is very helpful and powerful. Where we had a leaderboard, and I was like, we needed a leaderboard, and I was like, let's just go do it. Let's build it in React. And so that's what we're going to do today. Now, what I'm going to do whilst that's happening is I'm just going to get up. I'm going to make a new folder. I can't remember what this lecture's called. I'll go rename this correctly later. But it'll be the name of whatever's linked on the sheet, but I'll just do more React. Let me get that running. But basically, getting this leaderboard working was 2 parts. The first one was actually running the student's code and outputting it to a CSV. This CSV was put up publicly, essentially, on the internet, right? So you can go and access the CSV if you'd like to. You could go and do this exercise. You could pause the video right now and go complete it. And this CSV was basically pretty simple. It was just a bunch of group names, a bunch of git commit hashes, and then their scores in different areas. So in this case, this was their overall score, I believe. Oh no, this was their the score that they got when they run their tests against their own code. Then it was the score that they got when we ran our tests against their code, and then this was their final score, and then this was their rank. So this was how they all ranked compared to one another. And basically, we just want to build a nice little web page that prints that out, right? We just want to be able to print that out really, really easily. So let's do that. Create React app is still installing, but hopefully it's not far off. It looks like it's done the download part, and it's just doing the installation part. So what I'm going to do, a couple key things. I'm going to be using fetch to get the data, and I'm going to be using material UI to display it, right? So Material UI is a pretty easy way to display a web page. Should make it relatively easy for us. So let's start her up. Let's go inside demo more React. Great, and then I'll go npm start yarn start. It doesn't really matter. So that's going to start up the development server on localhost 3000. And there's my basic React app, and I'm going to go and open that folder too, really quick. Okay. And then here's that folder. So there's my simple React app. Here's this folder. Now I'm just going to go to the source directory here, and I'm going to open app.js. That's my main React app, as you know. You've probably done something like this before a bunch of times. I'm just going to get rid of everything here, and then we're going to go and start to build our own app. Now, hello. What's the first thing you would probably do if you were designing an app like this, right? Well, I think one of the easiest first places to start is to go and fetch the data. So we know that there's data at a few different URLs here. You know what? Let's go and fetch data from all 3 URLs just for fun. Now, how am I going to do this? Well, a couple of things. We could fetch data. Maybe we should fetch one at a time. So maybe let's start there. Let's just worry about iteration 1. So one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to use a use effect. You've probably seen this already. If you haven't, this might be the first time, but remember that a React use effect from the pre-recorded lectures is when you basically, because remember functional components run many times. A use effect is great when you only want a component to run, when you only want a piece of code to run a certain number of times, and you only want it to run every time that the stuff in the brackets changes. In this case, if you do an empty brackets, it means it only runs once at the start. So this is where I'm going to actually put my fetch. So I'm going to go and say, I want you to fetch this. Now, this is simply a, this is simply just like a URL. Because I'm not doing a post request or anything, I don't need any kind of methods or anything added to it. I can just kind of leave it like this. And then because I'm lazy and I want to use async await, I can just go and await it like this. And if I remember from my previous assignment too, I can just say, well, const response equals that, const data equals await response.json, and then I can just console log the data. Right? So I can get the data out like that. Now I come to my page, React is not defined. Sometimes when React isn't defined and you have to go and import it like this. But now I've got my hello page, and if I open up the console, it's not JSON. I don't know why I did that. I think that's just out of habit. It's actually text because it's just a CSV. Because remember, JSON is actually just the .text. Like, quite literally, the .json is kind of something like this. It's just like JSON.parse on the text. That's kind of all it normally is. So we're just going to get the text this time, and as you can see, that's a CSV. Now what we might want to do is parse the data whilst we're here. So I can see that this is just one big string. So what I might do is I might say, my lines is actually data.split. I'll split on a new line. See if this works. Just play around with the JavaScript. Okay, that seems to work. Now we've got 131 array items. You can see they're all kind of split on lines. And then what I might do is I might say, well, you know what? Data.split. Now I can, like, what you could do here is you could start doing like a for loop where you're like, for const line of lines, and then you make a new array called like cells. This gets really complicated to like then go and apply a split to all the rows, or you could just use the kind of shorthand JavaScript syntax, because remember, data.split returns you a list, like an array. So what I can do here is I can just say, well, I'm going to do a map on that array. And I'm going to say for each line, I want you to split each line on a comma. And now I can now I can just call this like data. I'll call this one data, and then we can actually print data. And then this should be pretty much all the data split up, I think. There you go. So we got 131 array items, and each one has 6 items in it, like that. So that's very good. Now again, this will only run once. But what that means is I can actually just add my own state here, and I'll call this like what would you call it, like progress or scores, I guess, or table data. Set table data equals react.useState, started as an empty list, and then here I can just say, well, you know, set table data, like that. Okay, there's my stuff. Now before we even get into Material UI, I could probably print this out really quickly, because I could just come along here and say, well, let's go make an HTML table just to try it out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a loop over table data dot map, where this is a row, like that. So now I'm looping over a list. And then I want to return something, which in this case will just be a tr, like a new row. And then inside here I'll do the same thing, where I'll say row.map, which is a cell. And inside of here I'll return the actual cell data, like this. And if I've done this right, I'm a bit worried that that hello didn't turn up before. Oh, it did work. Okay, there you go. So there's all the data, like that. We've printed it out to a page in a nice little HTML table. That's all pretty nice. This code is sufficiently simple that you could probably go and clean it up. As in, I could remember how I said in the previous lecture that if you have a map where all the body does is actually just return JSX, you can actually get rid of the brace and the return, and that actually cleans this up a little bit more, where I can do something like this, make the code just a little bit more succinct. That's not a requirement, but it does become a little bit easier to read, which is good. Anyway, so there's my table. Now, if I wanted to, and I look at this kind of leaderboard, I'm not going to include this part, but let's just look at this iteration 1 here, iteration 2 and 3. Let's actually go and put that input in. I don't know why that seems to just not appear sometimes. It's really weird. So I actually want to put an input at the top of my page. We'll maybe make a select here. Right. Put some values inside it. Those values can be iteration 1, 2, and 3. So we've got iteration 1, iteration 2, iteration 3. You could make this actually a little bit, if you wanted to be really sneaky with this, instead of kind of doing something like this where you say, you know, value, is it name? Is it ID? I can't remember. Does anyone remember? Option value, that's why I was stuck. You know, instead of doing something like this, which you could do, where you're like, you know, there are my 3 options. Another way you could actually write this even simpler, you could actually do a map, but map over 1, 2, and 3. Like, map and stuff is just a list. It's literally just a list. So I can just say 1, 2, 3, and I can just map over that, because that's all we're doing in all the other lists. And I'll call this iteration. And then I could just quite literally just put this right here. And just replace this one with, I'll call it I, just to shorthand. There you go. How easy was that? Nice and simple. Iteration 1, 2, and 3. Now what we're going to do is let's put an Unchanged Listener for the select. What's going to happen on the change? Well, let's console log the event first. So let's inspect it just to see what the data is. Okay, so when I change this to iteration 2, okay, I get all this stuff. Nothing I can see immediately there, so I'm going to return to my usual thing, which is I know that target.value is a really common thing you use. See if this works. Okay, iteration I can see that that didn't get parsed here. That makes sense because this is just a string. If I actually want that I to come through, what I have to do here is I have to turn this into like a piece of JavaScript like that. And it's a little bit weird, right? You'd have to do something like this, which I know seems a bit strange, but just using the double quotes literally makes it a string literal, like literally a string literal. Whereas this is saying with the braces, no. See this JSX here? What the value is actually going to be some JavaScript. So that's what the braces mean, JavaScript. This here is the template literal, if I believe it's called. And here's the string, and then here's the actual code I'm injecting. So now this should be a bit better. If I go on iteration 2, iteration 3, okay, so I'm capturing that. So now let's store this. Const iteration, set iteration equals react.useState. Well, maybe let's just store a number here. We could store a string, that'd be another way, but I just thought if it's a number, this actually makes our lives a little bit easier because actually does it make our lives a bit easier? Probably not. I guess that's going to be a little less strings being carried around, so now we could try that. Actually, let me just leave it how it was. I don't want to change code unnecessarily. Let's call this iteration 1. So now what I'm going to do is that when someone actually goes and changes that select input, I'm going to go and change this state variable. So instead of console logging that, I'm going to say set the iteration to be that iteration. And then I'll console log what the iteration is here, like that. Okay, so now when I change this to iteration 2, okay, so it's printing it out twice because I actually don't know why it's printing it out twice, but it is, doesn't really matter. So we're able to change between those different iterations there. But what I actually want to do with that is, and this is where the use effect comes in real handy, is that what I can do with the use effect is actually give it, in the capture, the iteration state. So now this use effect will run once at the start, but then it will run every time after that the iteration variable changes. And what I'm going to do here is instead of trying to load iteration1.csv, I'm actually going to try and load whatever iteration the state variable has .csv. And this is where things get super interesting. Yeah, maybe it is in strict mode, that makes sense. Or if I change this, it is grumpy at me. I don't know why I'm getting these errors. Let me go and fix this stuff up first. I'm just looking at these errors. No longer supported in React 18. Go create root until you switch to the new API. I don't know. Let me try downgrading React. Just while we're here, let's look at downgrading React. If I want to install a different version of React, let's see what version's got installed. I know that font's really tiny. It's tiny for me too. Okay, React version 18. So let me go and install. This is what you do. You go yarn install React at 17. That's how I could downgrade React. Sorry, it's yarn add. That'll go do its thing for a second. So we'll let it go do its thing. Oh, yarn. Here's a fun fact for you. We're literally struggling at work at the moment with a deployment issue, with a DevOps issue, where there's so many NPM modules being used by our repository now that when we go to deploy it to some servers on AWS, the yarn install takes so long that the process we're using actually times out because the yarn installs took too long. So abstractions, eh? Very painful. Okay, so let's refresh this. Well, I was hoping that would have gotten rid of my error, but it didn't. Anyway, these are all very strange errors. Actually, why am I... Okay, I'm very confused now. I might have broken something doing that. Let's go back to whatever version we had before. Sometimes it caches libraries. Once you download something, it tends to cache it on your computer, which is why the second installs and stuff tend to be much quicker. I probably shouldn't have touched anything. Okay, now let's look at some of the errors here. We've got the usual, each child in the list should have a unique prop key. We've seen that before. What we have to do here is that anything inside of a map, we have to give a key attribute, and that key attribute is just simply React DOM. I was thinking it might be both libraries. Bugger. We have to go in and do this. Key equals IDX. Now that's going to get rid of some of the errors for us. If I didn't just break more stuff. Okay, so that got rid of this. That got rid of a couple of them for us. Now there's some other stuff down here where the DOM's getting a bit angry. You can see that TR cannot appear as a child of table at a T-body, T-head, or T-foot. So I'm pretty sure the HTML standard actually has some like extra stuff that it wants in there, like a T-body. That's just, you know, it complaining, you know, it's good to get these good things in. See if that cleans it up. Great. And now we got one more error. Warning. Use effect must not return anything besides a function, which is used for cleanup. It looks like you wrote use effect or returned a promise. Instead, write an async function inside your effect and call it immediately. Huh, okay. So now it's looking at this and it's like, it basically, okay, so here's the thing about the await syntax. The async syntax. So you got to remember that what the await syntax does is it does all that promise.then stuff that you're used to. But the thing is, all the promise stuff only really works under this structure if the function it's being called in is itself a promise. So what the async syntax does is if you say something like async function foo, like this, the async syntax turns this into function foo, and let's say this is like blah. This turns it into this where it says, you know, return new promise, resolve reject, like this, blah. Now the reason that the await needs this to happen is because the await to work properly needs to kind of call the resolve and reject, you know, because, you know, you can imagine that if it's actually going to await here, it kind of still needs that underlying promise structure. Now here's the problem with this. This function here is void. It doesn't return anything. This function here returns something. So the reason the use effect is complaining at me here is because it's like your use effect seems to return something and it's not what we thought it would be. It's a little bit different to what we thought it would be. And that's because this is async here. So what it's telling me to do is it's saying, can you just take this for me and can you instead just create another function called blah? And can you please just like call blah like that? Now to you might think, that's a bit weird. But that's just kind of what JavaScript wants in this particular case. The other way around this, which is totally fine too, is to not even use async await and to just do what we did in assignment 2, which is just say fetch that, you know, dot then response.text dot then data, and then just, you know, or text I should say, and then just const data equals that. That's another way to do it. That's pretty readable too. Like once you understand promises, you know, there's nothing about that in particular that's, you know, super difficult to to read, right? Anyway, there's my iteration 1 when I changed to iteration 2. Okay. So this is actually doing a fetch every time. Iteration 3 doesn't seem to be working. I don't know why that is. We could console log some stuff out. Let's console log the data out. Data that. Iteration 3. Looks empty. I'm not sure why that is. Jordan says, what is the point of changing it? Do you mean to a promise, Jordan? Is that what you meant? Like away from the await async to a promise? If that is what you meant, just preempting it, there is no point. I was just showing you that it could be done another way. Like, I guess I was showing here that promises don't have to be too scary, particularly if they're simple, and particularly if, you know, like an example like this. Okay, so let's just worry about iteration 1 and iteration 2. You can see the other thing on my web page here is a little search thing. So if I'm, say, for instance, you know, team muddle. Let's say I know my team is muddle. I can just type in muddle like that. Let's do the same thing. Really powerful with React. Const search term set search term equals react.useState. Okay, now my search term here, we need to add an input to actually search it. Should really be that. Okay, there's my search term. Well, pretty simple. Value is going to be search term. And on change is going to just be what we've seen before, which is e equals set search term e.target.value, like that. Right? Like that. Now hopefully that should update like this. Now, Tinit says, do we really need to fix that warning? It seems to work even if we use async directly on the useEffect callback. No, like, as I say in the forum all the time, you can ignore warnings in the console. You don't need to fix any of that stuff. The reason I was fixing it tonight is one of two things. One is, well, actually, to be honest, the only reason I was fixing it is because I wanted people who've like seen these errors before to actually understand what it's saying, rather than just be like, I don't know what it's saying. But generally, if it's a warning, it's going to be okay. If it wasn't, it'd be an error. So as I do say in the forum and stuff a bunch of times, like, if it doesn't stop your code working, don't worry, just keep going. You've got other things to worry about, you know. It's web. Web's inherently a little bit buggy, particularly front end. So I've got my search term box here. Now what I want to do is I want to filter by it. We can do this really easily too. Here on my table data, as you can see, I'm actually going through every row. But what I want to do is I want to get like a filtered version of that table data. So I want to say, you know, my filtered table data is just table data. Except I actually want to run a filter on it. And what I want to do is I'm going to filter for each row, because the table data is a list of rows. And what I'm going to say is, you know what, for each row, I'm going to check if row 0, which is the name, because it's the first element, dot includes my search term. Like that. Really, really easy piece of code. All of 10 seconds. There you go. This is the power of declarative frameworks, or at least this is when I just think of this stuff and I go, holy, that is so simple, you know? You're not worrying about re-rendering. It's just like, well, there's a search thing. Fastberry, hey, please, history. Easy. Easy, easy, easy. Wonderful, in fact. Okay. Now, let's go and make this page not ugly as hell. Let's make it a little bit nicer like this one. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Material UI website and I'm going to try and install a few things. So MUI. Okay, npm install. Yeah, I dig that. By the way, if you use npm install when you have a React project, you can see here that we have both a yarn lock and a package lock. Package lock's used by npm, yarn lock's used by yarn. Having them both exist is, I guess, okay. I mean, when I say it's okay, I mean nothing terrible is going to happen, but generally you only want to install with one package manager. So it's kind of bad what I'm doing here with npm install. And actually, I think Create React App now uses npm to install. I could be wrong. But that yarn.lock was probably added when I did my yarn add React at 17, so I kind of probably screwed it up with the adding of the yarn. So now we just wait for this to install. Okay. Great, and then we'll load up our app again. I'll just load it up here. And now what I normally do is I say, you know what, I want to go and start stealing some stuff from the Material UI library. So I go to docs, and docs is made up of two kind of key things in the sidebar. The first thing it's made up of is the components. That's usually where I look. It's kind of like a real high level view of all these different things, like checkbox and stuff. It's a lot of examples, which to be honest, I think is all I kind of really need when I'm doing this stuff. And then the next one, though, is the component API, which is the same thing a lot of the time. It's just got a lot more detail. It's like got all of the particular properties. So let's start with, the oh, you get dependency conflicts, damn. Okay. So let's start with like what we have on the page. We have a drop down and we have an input. So I'm going to look for that. Let's look for select. Is there a select here for us? I'm just going to search. Pretty sure the Material UI, oh no, it's a different browser. So select, great. Okay, little drop down. That's kind of cute. So what I'm going to do is I'm literally going to go and click on this. Show the source code. I'm just going to go and grab it. Here's what I do. I grab that. I look at my page. I go and paste it here. I say, okay, I look at all this handle change stuff and I think, yeah, I'm already managing my own state for the options. And I just kind of inspect the code for a minute and I say, all right, state variable, handle change, I get it. Handle change, it's already there. And then I think, I've already got my items, menu items. So now I say, well, I'm going to go and take all of this. I'm going to go and put that here with my select. Except my one's a little bit different because my options here were generated and I have to go and change option to menu item. And then I just delete those three options and I take my on change for the select. You know what I mean? Like you just shove it together like this. You just kind of modify it and you just keep twisting it and you end up with something like that. Now I've got my box now, right? Sorry, I was just looking at indentation. Why is that not indented correctly? I'm so confused. Oh, right, this is meant to be one more. Yep. Let me go fix up the syntax on this. JavaScript, JSX. So now I've got that, but if I was to just do that, I'm going to have some errors. Those errors are going to be import errors. There's going to be a whole bunch of components from Material UI that can't be found. So now I need to go and include them. Now I've already including React, so I'm going to leave that out for now. And everything else there it seems to want. So there you go. Okay, so now we have this drop down. Look at that, nice and simple. You can see that the drop down's kind of a bit ugly because it's getting cut off by something. So maybe I'll add, you know, a div here. What I might do here is I might go and change this file from app.css to app.module.css, and then I might include styles from app.module.css, which is probably going to break the page. Oh well. And then I'm going to go and give this div a class name of body or something, and then I'll go body here, margin 10 pixels. Now I can't actually say class name.body, it has to be class name styles.body, because remember, when you include a CSS module like this, you include it like styles.body. We've been through that in the previous lecture or tune, I can't remember. But there you go, iteration 2, iteration 1. Okay, that's alright. Now let's go get a text field. Okay, text field. Search term. Maybe I want something a little bit more. Yeah, these all look fine. We'll just grab one of these randomly. Standard, we'll just grab the standard one. Seems fine. So I go and copy the whole code example again. I come down to where my input was. There's my input down here. I'm just going to paste that again. Now let's just say we only want one of these. Which one do we think looks good? I think the standard one looks good. So I'm going to go take that and I'm going to go put that here. And then I'll get rid of all. Oh, and then it says that we want it in some kind of box. Okay, well I'll put it in a box then. I'll do what it says. So there's the box. We'll put the text field in the box. Okay. And then it says we also want to include these two files with our code. So I'll go and include those up the top as well. I've already got box though, so I don't need that. And text field I don't have, so I do need that. Now the page is going to come up with two inputs. I can get rid of my second one because I'm just going to call this one search term, like that. Okay. And then I'll go and add my properties to that. So I'm going to add value and onChange. I'm going to add those both to the text field. Okay. Oh, seems to work. Okay, hapless, great. Alright, now this is all good, but the page does seem a little bit short to me. I don't really like how this box up here is little bit, I don't know, a little bit long. Looks kind of awkward, you know what I mean? Just like being oddly long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another style here. Say width. Doesn't need to be that. It should just be like width 200 pixels. I have no idea if that does anything. I'm actually not sure how to change the width of that. This is where this is where sometimes, for instance, it's worth going and like looking up the API. So like what I'll typically do here is I'll be like, oh, I don't know what property that should be. So then I'll go back to the Material UI library and I'll actually go to the component API and I will choose select. And then I'll look here and I'll search for width. Auto width. Oh, that's it. Okay. Well, maybe it is just a component. I'm not sure. That's okay. I'd play around with that later. So now we got to make the table look all nice. So to make the table look nice, I'm going to go and add a table. Table's a lot of fun. So what do we got? I don't see a lot of, oh, I was like, that's not a table. Table. Okay, so we've got a few things here. This is a table with a checkbox. This is a table without a checkbox. Basic table. What else we got? Sorting and selecting. Sorting and selecting sounds fun. Is it just sorting? dense table, customization, pagination. Wow. Now what you'll actually find quite often on libraries like this is that we're not looking at a bunch of different components. We're actually just looking at one component which has different parts of the API being applied to it. So for instance here, let's just copy one random table like this one. This table is going to be a little bit big. Little bit big. Lots of stuff. So if I go take that, and let's just paste it down here. Whew, lots of stuff. What I'll do is I'll go and put that in another file next to us. So now I think, gosh, I got to get all this in. So let's take a moment to actually look at this code and see what it is. Well, firstly, I can see that there's all this stuff it wants me to include. So I'm going to go and import that just off the bat. I don't think any of this is included already, so that's all fine. And now I can see if I look through my data, I see, okay, there's a component. Okay, it's got this page state. What's that for? Oh, that's for the pagination. Okay, well, we care about pagination, so let's keep that. Let's put that in our state. Rows per page. Yeah, let's put that there too. Seems like it can't hurt. Okay, and then we've got what looks like the table here. So I'm going to go and maybe try and copy and paste all of this. So there's the actual table. So instead of what I have here, we'll put our table just above it. Now when we have a look at our table, you can see things here like we've got max height, okay, table row, table body. And if I look at this, I can see that there's the table head and there's the columns that are being listed. And then here's the body. Alright, so this is where it's going to take a little bit of massaging, because all this stuff up here just seems to be data, right? We have our own data. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say, well, you know what? Columns is just going to be a list of, what was it? It was group, commit, your tests, our tests, overall score, and your rank. They're like the columns. It's like, okay, there are my columns. Columns.map, column.id, align, and min width. And I think, oh, look at all their columns here. They've got all this data. But you know, maybe I don't need all of that. Maybe I'll just leave that out for now. Or I'll just say, you know, yeah, maybe I'll just leave all of that out. Let's keep it simple. Column. Just to start. Then I come down here and I've got all my rows. Now this looks kind of familiar. What do we have down here? We had row. Okay, so I could probably like go and copy and paste that in a way. Okay, filter table data, great. Now they've got slice. Okay, so what's the slice doing? I mean, I probably shouldn't have picked the pagination example because it's a little bit complicated, but you can see what the slice is doing is essentially taking a list and going and grabbing elements between 2 points. So this one's like, you know, if it's page 2 and there's 20 rows per page, go and get the 40th row all the way up to the 40th plus 20 rows, right? Like, so this slice can be applied here like this. Slice.that to my map, and okay, map row, return table row. Okay, so now we're getting into the territory where it's like we're just looking at the table row part now. Sorry, just wondering what that syntax is up to. Oh, it just doesn't like it. Okay. So okay, I see table row, I've got all this stuff in here, and I think looks kind of the same, so I'm going to go and copy that in. Now, I would also not recommend that you ever make this many code changes at once without testing your code. That's just an obvious thing to recommend. And then I've got my columns here, columns.map. Okay. I called mine here cell, and I had an IDX2. And they've got all this kind of random stuff here. So I'm actually like, I'm honestly just going to be like, you know what, guys, I'm just going to use your table cell, and I'm just gonna keep it really simple. Just going to do exactly what I had there. Why is this not working? This is very strange. Anyway, I feel like we've mostly gotten there now. There's going to be a whole bunch of errors that we haven't tackled properly yet, and you'll see that when we go and open the app, and we'll start to see a bunch of errors. Oh, I did a dot, right? So there's like, okay, there's an error. Okay, columns is not defined on line 90. Oh, yeah, it's because that should just be cell, or IDX2 in this case. Okay, rows is not defined on line 102. Now this one makes sense because this was just the code we got given, but we didn't call our table rows, right? We called it filter table data. Handle change page is not defined. Can handle changes row page. So this is like, if we go back to our old code here, you remember that there were these two functions. So just for now, you know, I'll just go copy these in here. Keep that nice and simple. Okay. Oh, there you go. Now, sort of. This is a little bit weird. Looks like the column was successfully added here, which is good. But what's then happened is that here, I should have been looping over the row, not the columns. But this might give me an error. Oh, that seems okay. Okay. Next page. Oh, just works. This is the useful thing about component libraries. They tend to just kind of like behave for you. The minimum height does seem a little bit small to display all the content. Okay, so that seems a lot better. Rows per page, 25. Okay, kind of sucks that it doesn't actually make it bigger, but what are you going to do? Oh, and you see it's actually smart enough to, if I go look up something on like a latter page, it goes and like figures it out. That's very handy. Well, actually, I guess that makes sense. I guess we did that because we filtered the initial list. That's not really material UI. Anyway, here you go, is my point. Look at us. We just built a leaderboard. It's been like 40 minutes. That's how easy it is. It's like, there you go. What else exists on this leaderboard? On this, on the course one? Okay, looks like the people who scored 100% get a little emoji. Well, that's easy enough, right? We just go through the work and we say, well, actually this is kind of a bit hard. Not hard, but how would we do that? How would we put an emoji on the group name if their overall score is 100%? I would generally recommend not doing this within the table, because this table itself should be, the rendering should be really focused on actually just how to display the material, not manipulating the data itself. So if I come up here, what I should be doing here is actually saying, you know what, we've got this filtered data here. But before we get that filtered data, or even like, yeah, filtered table data, we could maybe make a, you'd nearly say table data.filter, and then maybe we'll do a dot map on it, you know, and we'll go through every item, right? So we'll say, you know, every row. And now we'll have a little function, and what this function will do is, what will it check? Well, it'll return the row, and it'll check, you know, if row, what item is that? It's like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. Okay. If row 4 equals 100.0, console log, what's the emoji? Or I just say row 0 plus equals that emoji, maybe? Right. So row 4 is the score, row 0 is the group. Will this work? Holy crap, it worked. What's the problem with this though? Why is this? Why is this doing that? Why is it returning? Why are there 2 emojis there? Oh no. Does someone know why it's putting 2 emojis there? That's pretty weird. I think it's pretty weird. I'm not actually sure why it's doing that. Okay. Very peculiar. This is weird to me because at first I think, oh, React's rendering it twice, but then I think, well, it doesn't make sense because the name isn't repeating. I don't know. This is very strange to me, actually. It implies that the plus equals, maybe it is repeating twice, I guess. But I don't think that makes sense because it would re-render it. Do you know what I mean? Like if it was running through the component twice, it would just render it twice. Yeah. How do I disable strict mode again? Is it really strict mode? Okay, it is strict mode. Very smart. Jimmy's very smart. It's interesting though, I didn't know that strict mode... I find it strange that it would... It's not that it runs it twice that I find strange, it's that... I would have thought if it ran it twice that it would like render it twice, not run through it twice, you know what I mean? Because it seems strange, it's like it's running through it twice but rendering... Anyway, you get... It's weird. So, thank you, Jimmy. Very smart. So, there you go. Little emojis. Does the job. Really easy. Really, really easy. Really easy to add more stuff too, right? Like, if you go to the Material UI component library, like what else did they have on this page? They had column grouping and collapsible table, sticky header. Do we have a sticky header? Yeah, we have a sticky header. Great. What else do they have? Custom pagination actions. Ooh, black header. That looks nice. How do they do that? Oh, they're using style components here. Ooh, looks so complicated. Yeah, anyway. So, that's actually kind of it tonight in terms of like what I had planned. As we get towards the end of the course, we can always spend less time on stuff. Does anyone have any questions, or does anyone have any things that they specifically want me to go through? Because if we're not going to go through much more, then I'll just wrap up soon instead of taking a break. But I'll just give everyone a couple minutes. If you have any questions at all, please ask them in the next couple of minutes, because I'm not going to ask again tonight, and I'll go through all of the questions anyone has until we run out of questions, till we run out of like time to do stuff. So, yeah, that'd be great. It does start to break for other iterations though. This is the interesting thing. Notice how that the overall mark and this one, the columns are different for another iteration. This is where it gets really tricky, because it's like now you kind of have to be like, oh, geez, well, you know, say let columns equal empty string, and then you say, you know, if iteration equals iteration 1, then we'll say columns equals that. You know, else if iteration equals iteration 2. You know, we'll say columns is, well, it's slightly different. It's the group and then commit and then the tests and then that looks like, I don't even know, your test, our test looks like coverage or something. Let's look at what this says for iteration 2. Oh, pylint. Okay. Who remembers pylint? So you know, group, pylint, your tests, our tests. My stupid head's in the way. There we go. Okay, refresh the page. Wait, what? Oh, wait. Oh, the page is just really big. One sec. It's on another screen. Yeah, okay, so iteration 1, we got that stuff. If I change it to iteration 2, it should give me different columns. Okay, great. We're getting closer. Coverage, overall rank. Okay, there you go. So now we need to be like, well, it's a different one. You know, like, if it's iteration equals iteration 1. This is why I said before, it's probably better to store the iteration as a number, not as a string. So if I do something like that, or when I say or, actually I could keep this, oh yeah, or if iteration equals iteration 2 and row 6 is 100. You know, you get a few weird edge cases here, but you could obviously try and abstract this out if you wanted to and be like, you know, I'll store some, like, you know, here I could be like, you know, const overall score index equals, you know, you could tidy this up if you wanted to, if you get the point. It's all pretty straightforward. Okay, no other questions? I know there's only 10 people here tonight, so I didn't expect a lot, but it's good. It didn't take us very long. That's not a bad thing. It's not bad that we got through that quickly. I think it's another testament again to how powerful these kinds of declarative frameworks are. So, yeah. Well, if there aren't any other questions, let's wrap up for the night then, and keep going away with your assignment 3. I hope it's going well. If you have any questions, please keep posting on the forum. I'll always help where I can. So will the tutors. I hope the help sessions have been really useful. We're running lots of them, so please go to those if you want. And sorry, was there a question, Mitchell? Oh, I mean, I don't know why the strict mode was causing that. I just don't know. I haven't played around with strict mode a lot. I don't do a lot of stuff with it. So the theory makes sense though. About it getting renders then gets the data, but I don't know why it wouldn't re-render the whole thing again. I'm not familiar enough with React in that detail. Yeah. Just some reminders. Don't forget, if you're working in a pair, to make sure you're both committing evenly enough. Make sure one of you isn't doing all the work, or make sure you're not working on the same computer or something. I don't think there's any other reminders besides, remember that assignment 3 is due at 10 a.m. on Thursday of week 10. This is the latest we've ever had it due. I extended it for you all, so I hope that's good. We can't make it due any later though, because then your tutors won't actually get a chance to mark it before the exam, which would suck for you, because a lot of students like to know. Because the cool thing about 6080 is that because the exam's only worth 20%, you can go into the exam with 80% of the course being done. Most of you will have passed the course before the exam, or you'll be like at 47 or something. You'll score 15% in the exam, right? So it's a scaled 15% too. Anyway, Mitchell, I don't know what your question was. Post it on the forum. Sorry, I don't know why it doesn't appear on YouTube. I'm not sure if that's me or if it's YouTube. But thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great night. As I said, we're here to support you. Nearly at the end of term. Last week's our last lecture and our last shoot. So I hope you're all chugging along okay and keep looking after yourselves. And we'll see you next week for the last lecture. So have a great night. We'll chat soon.